Today's video, we're going to go over my top tips for more effective and efficient practice sessions. So you don't want to be wasting your time going out there and practicing on a regular basis and getting the same poor result over and over. You want to get better and better and better, and these things will help you do that. I spent a lot of time working with students who spend a lot of time practicing for very little result. So it's not about how much we practice, it's how many efficient reps we make during that practice session. So you could go out for an hour a day, and if your casting practice looks like this, it doesn't matter how many times we do this, it's never going to improve. So we don't want to go out and just do the same incorrect motion over and over and over and then hope that we get lucky once in a while. There's a lot of casters don't rely on efficient tight loops to get accurate and longer distance casts. They rely on volume and hope you get lucky every now and then. If you're going to take the time to practice, you also want to make sure you're practicing correctly with proper form. So that all starts with understanding how the cast works. What are the 5 rules of a fly cast? What things make a tight loop? What things make an open loop? And being able to understand what caused it to go wrong when it didn't go exactly how you wanted. The very first thing I can recommend when you're practicing is you need to look at the back cast. If you're not seeing what your back cast looks like, you don't know if it was excellent, horrible, somewhere in between. And lots of people practice and only ever look in front of them, and their back casts wind up something like this, that go down in the back and they never get to straighten out, causing slack in the line and a poor result on the forward cast. So how do we see what our back cast looks like? Well, there's 2 ways you can do this. The first and simplest way is you can turn your head around and look at your cast. If you're standing with both feet together, even a square stance towards your target, and I turn around to look at my back cast, it's very likely that my rod tip swings around behind me as well, which will affect my loop. If I put my casting foot slightly back, not only does it give me a much longer range of motion to cast with, but now at the end of my back cast, I can turn my head back and forth and it does not affect where my rod goes at all. So if I'm going to be watching my back cast, I'm using my eyes to tell that back cast where I want it to go. I want it to go up in the back. I see it straight, I come forward. Up in the back, I see it straight, I come forward. Instead of doing hundreds and hundreds of reps like this and have no idea what it looked like. Was it good, horrible, somewhere in between? Should I change it a lot, change it a little, or totally, or keep it exactly like I've been doing because it was great? If you're not looking back there, you'll never know, good or bad. You don't know, keep or change. The other thing you can do is set up a camera or have somebody hold a camera. Every single camera today has video on it. Most all of them have slow-mo. I recommend watching yourself in slow motion if you've not done so. But if you have someone with a camera, where my camera is set right now, watching you make your back cast, you'll be able to see if you had a big open loop, if I stopped going down and I ruined my loop, or if I was going up and making efficient tight loops. So use a camera, or at the very minimum, turn around yourself and look behind you. My second recommendation when you're practicing your fly cast is have a goal when you start. What is your goal going to be for that session? And then work on accomplishing that goal. However, we don't want to start with goals that are way above our reach when we don't have a solid foundation. So all our casting has to be built on a good foundation, which means tight, efficient loops. Otherwise, we're never going to get to these longer distances, the double hauling, shooting line, everything else people want to get to, but never do, because their base cast, the foundation of everything else they do, is wide open loops, which cause slack in their cast. So if I'm going to be practicing I want to set a goal of seeing a loop, and I don't want to be happy with just straightening out line. And by just straightening out line, I call it the cane pole slap. A lot of anglers develop this cast. Nobody wants to see the line fall in a pile at the end, so even when we're practicing, people will do things that get their line straight, kind of like this. My line went perfectly straight. That was not a fly cast, that's just slapping line down into the water. As soon as the wind blows, that cast completely falls apart. And when we're practicing, our objective is not to see if we can straighten line, it's to see if we can unroll line. The difference between that is, this is straightening line out, this is just slapping line back and forth in the air. This is unrolling line behind us and in front of us, and we see a J shape, a candy cane shape, a curved narrow loop traveling not only in front of us but the same loop behind us. So the next recommendation is that when you're practicing, you're doing this as gentle and delicate as possible. If I spend my practice sessions putting a bunch of speed and effort into my cast like this, and I'm not under any pressure or don't have any adrenaline already pumping through me because I've seen a bunch of fish, imagine what happens when that big school of fish or just that trophy fish or any fish at all, and you're under pressure to get it right in front of them. Imagine what happens to your cast then. If we're already practicing in the red zone, a little pump of adrenaline, you're into the black zone and everything completely falls apart. But if we practice super gentle and easy and as slow as I possibly can I bring my rod down to a whisper? Then if I take that cast and even double the speed of that thing, if I take this cast, all of a sudden there's that big fish, and I start going a little faster and a little harder, at least it didn't completely fall apart. So the key to practicing gentle all starts with our casting hand. It must be super relaxed. Take your last two fingers off and barely hold on to it with your middle finger. So practice casting with 90% of your pressure in your thumb and your first finger. Use that middle finger just to keep the rod in your hand, and we are holding these things super light. You're barely using any pressure at all. That relaxes my entire arm, which allows me to have a nice smooth stroke from front to back and back to front, and more importantly, it makes it much easier to do the little flip at the end of this cast that is oh so important. Right there, there, at the end of every stroke, there's a little flick that speeds up that rod tip, sends that line out in the direction we want it to go. If we squeeze this hand, now my entire arm all the way up to my shoulder is rock hard, stiff. It's really good for punching like a piston. It's not so good for going and having that little flip at the end. So as soon as I squeeze this hand, now it makes me have to cast much harder. I'm going to try to cast gentle with my hand squeezed. It is so awkward to do this slow and gentle because I can't get that little flip at the end. Just 5 minutes of squeezing that rod or less, you're going to be shaking your hand out going, this is really not enjoyable at all. But if you're holding this rod like it's a little baby bird you picked up that fell out of his nest, we can make that cast oh so gentle, nice and delicate, make soft presentations to spooky fish if needed, and pinpoint accuracy. My next recommendation for your fly casting practice is learn on more than one style of cast. So if I only know how to make this cast, that's fine if I can cast in that position given the situation. But what if I had a sun low in the sky behind me and holding my rod way up here send a shadow way up over those fish that was going to scare them? What if I needed to get up underneath the tree branches over there, right up against that shore? Maybe I would need to cast down here. Now I can keep my shadow lower. I can put stuff up underneath targets, making a much less likely to be seen presentation. What if all of a sudden the fish were over on that side of me and we were in a boat? Here's the front of my boat. Over here are my fish. Back here behind me are other people in the boat. So I really can't, shouldn't, or don't want to be casting like this with hooks in their face or trying to keep it above their head. Have you ever practiced being able to put casts over on your back cast? Very few people I fish with ever practice letting stuff go on their back cast side. What if I had a really strong wind blowing into my right ear, but I still needed to cast out this way? Well, you could cast over your shoulder. This isn't usually how we cast, but this may be something else you want to practice. Practice your off-shoulder cast. But have you ever practiced this cast? We turn around, and now I just let it go on my back cast again. No way that wind ever blows it into me if I'm keeping the rod and all my line downwind. I need to practice casting at different distances, not the same 25, 30, 35 feet every time. Can I pick it up, cast at one distance, strip it in a few feet, put it back at another spot? So when I'm practicing, I'm picking different spots, and I'm picking small spots, not a spot the size of a adult hula hoop. We're picking a little spot the size of your dinner plate. Can we get it near that or right on top of that dinner plate size? When I practice out here in this water, I use floating leaves, and that gives me a nice small target. And I can also practice picking it up on one side, putting it down on the other side. Can I move it from side to side, make little tiny adjustments with minimal back and forth false casting? Practicing our accuracy is not something we always may need, especially where you fish, but there is always the chance that you can see a fish rising, see a fish busting, see a school of fish, see a fish floating, see something indicating that there is a target there for you. Can you hit that target, or did you spend all your practice just chucking it out, and wherever it landed, as long as it kind of got straight, that was okay? And now you cannot get it to that location, especially under pressure. So my final recommendation is once you have your good foundation, spend your time seeing if you can accurately present that fly if needed. And my test for that is, can I take this fly and either unroll it right above the water, which I would do if I was fishing, or you can start by, can you just touch the fly only on the water? Only fly. This is fly and leader. So now I'm aiming going down. My fly does not hit first, so it may not even land where I want, especially in any wind. Can I take this fly only? Now I can unroll it right above my targets. I know exactly where it's going to land. A little secret, the only way you're going to get that to work for you is if your back cast is going up. As soon as my back cast goes down, the ability for me to get that fly only has completely disappeared. I can slap leader and the end of my fly line on the water. You're not going to be able to get your fly to land first, which means your line is not straightening out, then going into your target. You're plopping the line down, your leader and your fly are rolling over, and you hope they don't get blown side to side or back towards you or plop down on the fish's head really hard. You want to put fly in the water first if we're going for accuracy. That way we know exactly where it's going to land, and the closer that target, the higher that back cast has to get. The farther away the target, you can start to drop it down, but there will not be an occasion where you'll be able to make a back cast that heads down and a forward cast that heads down as well. Because then we are going around in a complete half circle, destroying our loop shape and eliminating the ability for that loop to unroll down towards the water. So those are my basic tips for your fly casting practice. Practice efficiently, effectively, have a plan in mind, and understand how casting works. And most important of all, look at yourself casting. If you can't see what you're doing, if you're not paying attention to what you're doing, you're quickly and easily going to develop bad habits, which will be sometimes impossible to get rid of. If you want to learn more about good fly casting techniques and the foundation of casting, you can check out my fly casting playlist right here.